Dennis Smith Jr. was once a high-flying point guard, drawing comparisons to the like of Baron Davis, Steve Smith, and even Russell Westbrook. But just 4 years later, he's completely out of the NBA. What happened to Dennis Smith Jr.? Dennis Smith Jr. attended Trinity Christian Academy in Fayetteville, North Carolina, where he put together one of the greatest and sickest high school mixtapes of all time. But he also catapulted himself into a 5-star point guard rating in the class of 2016. According to 24/7 Sports, he was a top 5 point guard in the class and a top 10 player in the class. He got interest and received offers from the likes of Duke, Kentucky, North Carolina, Kansas, and more, but ultimately decided to attend North Carolina State, where he would be closer to home and also get a nice little paycheck from them on the back end. Dennis Smith Jr. went on to produce a great year in college basketball as he lit up the ACC and college basketball as a whole, putting up a stat line of 18 points per game, 4.6 rebounds a game, and 6 assists a game on 45, 35, 71% shooting splits. He would go on to make the ACC All-Freshman team, the All-ACC team, and win the ACC Rookie of the Year, beating out future NBA star Jason Tatum. Now, North Carolina State did not exactly have a great record that year, finishing the year at 15-17, but little blame fell on Dennis Smith Jr. because there was not a whole lot of NBA talent on that team. There was Omar Yurtseven here, but this was not the Omar Yurtseven that the Miami Heat have drafted. With 1 year in the books in college for Dennis Smith Jr., he took his talents to the NBA draft and declared for the 2017 NBA draft. The 2017 NBA draft was star-studded, with Lonzo Ball, Markelle Fultz, and Jason Tatum being the consensus top 3 picks across all platforms, and Dennis Smith Jr. was rumored to go anywhere between the 5th and the 10th pick, but it seemed like the noise was that the Knicks were going to draft Dennis Smith Jr. at the 8th overall pick, and that would be where he went if he didn't go between 5 and 7. However, on draft night, when the Knicks had the opportunity to draft Dennis Smith Jr. with the 8th overall pick, they took a different point guard. They took Frank Ntilikina out of France, which got a lot of noise and commotion around that. But it allowed the Dallas Mavericks to pick the young point guard out of North Carolina State with the 9th overall pick, and that was a selection that was met with a lot of praise from major media outlets like Bleacher Report. They gave the pick an A+ for the Mavericks. Dennis Smith Jr. entered his rookie year with pretty high expectations, and he had the 9-2 odds to win Rookie of the Year, which was 3rd highest amongst all rookies. With an aging Dirk on the roster and not many legitimate scoring options on the roster, Dennis was the number 1 option and was catapulted into the starting point guard position for the Mavericks that year. With a bad roster around him, he averaged 15.2 points per game, 5.2 assists per game, and 3.8 rebounds a game. And topped it off with some of the greatest dunks that I have seen as a Mavericks fan in my time. While the season didn't go well for the Mavericks with a 24-58 record, there were some sore spots in Dennis Smith Jr.'s game, mainly his really bad efficiency from the field at 39.5% and his 69% from the free throw line. Nice. But there were also some very clear positives that he showed. The playmaking was better than we expected it, and the athleticism was otherworldly. He finished second in the team in scoring to Harrison Barnes that year, and while the shot was not aesthetically super poor, it just had issues finding the bottom of the net at times, which led to the .395 from the field. Despite the negatives that we just went over, Dennis was selected the All-Rookie second team and had the most votes of all All-Rookie second team members. The rookie year as a whole was a success for Dennis Smith Jr., and the Dallas Mavericks were very pleased with the talent that they drafted. Going into the 2018 season for the Dallas Mavericks roster had some pretty big overhaul. They drafted Eurostar Luka Doncic in the first round and college star Jalen Brunson in the early second round, and signed veteran big man DeAndre Jordan as the starting center on the team. It was a large overhaul for a team that was previously Dennis Smith Jr.'s team. There were some questions on if Dennis Smith Jr. could have the responsibilities of a co-star to Luka Doncic, and as he was a ball-dominant guard, and Luka was also a ball-dominant guard. Early on in the year, there were some questions on if Luka and Dennis were even getting along on and off the court. Stories came out that Dennis Smith Jr. and Luka were clashing heads, and while he never explicitly asked for a trade, he said he was open to the idea. He said, quote, "He likes the organization and the players. I just don't think it was a good basketball fit." A little side note, as a Mavericks fan, thanks to this Tim Cato article, we now know that Dennis and Luka were really good friends. They were together all the time. They were great together. It was just a mismanaged team. It was just a mishandled organization that shouldn't have drafted a young point guard in the situation that it was in, a young, raw point guard. With Mark Cuban's hand-on approach and a failing front office, it was difficult, and the difficulties of playing as a young player with Rick Carlisle, a old veteran coach that always wanted to win and never put any stock into the young players' development. That's the end of that little rant. But Dennis was right overall. His playstyle didn't fit the way Luka wanted to play. Dennis was an inefficient shooter and needed the ball in his hands, and Luka was clearly the better player already, as he was the unanimous Rookie of the Year at this point. But not all was lost that year for the Dallas Mavericks and Dennis Smith Jr. Dennis Smith Jr. went on to catch the greatest poster in Mavericks history, dunking on Julius Randle when he was good with the Pelicans. But trade rumors still swarmed all around the sophomore guard and take on a bigger role where he would be able to have the ball in his hands more often. On January 31st, 2019, the Dallas Mavericks traded Dennis Smith Jr., draft capital, and salary filler to the New York Knicks for one-time All-Star Kristaps Porzingis, as well as Tim Hardaway Jr. and more salary filler. This, in my opinion, marks the beginning of the end for Dennis Smith Jr. in the NBA. Dennis Smith Jr. got a bigger role, and was looked at to be the starting point guard in the mecca of basketball. But looking at the roster around him, Ron Baker, fun, you see a subpar roster overall, highlighted by Fortnite boy Kevin Knox, rookie center Mitchell Robinson, and, quote, better than Luka Doncic, Alonzo Trier. Thank you, Rashard Phillips, for that. Dennis was looked at to be the centerpiece of New York in that season, and for the rest of the year, he was. He averaged 14.7 points a game, 3 boards, and 4 assists with the Knicks that year. But there was a number that sticks out like a sore thumb, his abysmal 57% from the free throw line that year. Coming into the 2019-2020 season, Dennis was poised to take another step forward, but he started the year coming off the bench for Elfrid Payton, who was acquired that offseason by the New York Knicks. And when Dennis did play that year off the bench, he was not good. Sometimes Dennis was on the court and Knicks fans would chant, "We want Frank," referring to Frank Ntilikina to play over him.
Crowd still booing Smith Jr. and his shooting futility. He is really struggling. And the offense is the part, that's his game. He's never been a strong defender. And the chant of "We want Frank" is starting there at the guard. That's tough for a young man here from the home crowd. He is obviously struggling. He has not been able to get.
But Frank Ntilikina was just as bad as Dennis Smith Jr., if not worse. This is something that clearly got to Dennis's head. When the team you're playing for has fans chanting they don't want to see you on the court, as a young guard in the league, barely 20 years old, it takes a lot out of you. He continued to struggle staying on the court due to a number of injuries, a pattern we're about to see a whole lot more of. Well, when he did touch the court, he continued to be inefficient from the floor, falling farther and farther down the rotation. Some nights getting DNPs by coach's decision. He finally asked the Knicks one day to put him in the G League so he could just play some basketball. The Knicks obliged and sent him down to the Westchester Knicks, but Dennis never suited up for the Westchester Knicks. It was traded later that week for veteran guard Derrick Rose, where he was sent to Detroit. The Knicks were done with Dennis Smith Jr. He finished his years with the Knicks injury-riddled and disappointing. Dennis went on to play 20 games for the Pistons, averaging 7 points a game on, you guessed it, inefficient numbers. He ended his Pistons saga by tearing his meniscus. He wasn't great with the young Pistons, and it started to become evident that he may be on his way out of the league at this point in time. Dennis did, however, get one more shot. signing with the Portland Trail Blazers on September 1st, 2021. When Damian Lillard went down with injuries halfway through the season, it looked like it was going to be Dennis's time to shine. And overall, I thought Dennis played pretty well for the Portland Trail Blazers. Now, once again, inefficient and the shooting wasn't there, but he had moments. But then he got injured again and couldn't get back on the court for the rest of the season. And the Portland Trail Blazers waived Dennis Smith Jr. for the remainder of the year. This is the last time we have seen Dennis Smith Jr. in the NBA. Nowadays, Dennis Smith Jr. is best known for a feature in a 21 Savage song by J. Cole, which is 21 Savage's best song. But all jokes aside, Dennis is working on an NBA return at the moment and is doing a lot of private runs, which you can find on his Instagram and Twitter, running with players like Donovan Mitchell, Colin Sexton, who just got traded for each other. That's funny. He has a different jump shot aesthetically, which I'm not in love with, but if it's going in, it's going in. And despite all the injuries that he has suffered, he still looks really explosive going downhill, still able to get to the basket at will. I really hope to see a return from Dennis Smith Jr. in the coming years. I know that he really cares and loves the game of basketball. And as a Mavericks fan, I hate to see someone that I rooted for and have a jersey of, actually, fall down the path that he did. It looks like he's put a lot of work in this offseason, and I'm just hoping that he gets a call from an NBA team. There are three main reasons I think that Dennis has not stuck in the league. The first one is the most obvious: injuries. Nowadays, the league is so talented, you have to stay on the court if you want regular playing time, and that is something Dennis has struggled with. Just hasn't been able to stay on the court. The second reason is that he played erratically. There were some nights where he was playing 40 minutes a game, and then there was some nights he was getting coaches DNPs. That is very confusing for a young guard. Usually you want to know your role. You don't want to be going out there guessing every day. And the third kind of ties into this second, which he was playing for broken franchises that weren't coached well and weren't ran well overall. The end of the Rick Carlisle saga in Dallas was ugly. The Tom Thibodeau New York Knicks weren't good. The Detroit Pistons, we all know that Detroit isn't good. And Portland Trail Blazers last year were one of the worst teams in the league. I think this is something that goes under the radar when we talk about the failures of young players. I think that Dennis is a great guy, and I want nothing but the best for him, whether he gets a shot in the league or not. If you've watched this far, this is the end of the video. I thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. I think that you should like and subscribe since you're here and you've watched me talk for like 12 minutes. So I'll see you next time. Thank you. Thank you for watching. It's been Empty Stats, and I'll see you next time.